Every crime is a wound on the world. We're here to dissect it, layer by layer, to find the truth buried within. This is Anatomy of Crime. Picture the scene. It is June 2016. The legendary Wembley Arena in London is pulsating with the energy of thousands of screaming fans. The atmosphere is indistinguishable from a major pop concert. Pyrotechnics flash, and the opening chords of Alicia Keys's "Girl on Fire" echo through the cavernous stadium. But the crowd is not there for a musician. They are waiting for a savior of a different kind. Out walks Dr. Ruja Ignatova, a self-styled visionary draped in a sparkling ball gown. Adorned with diamond earrings and signature red lipstick, she commands the stage with an absolute, undeniable magnetism. To the adoring masses in the arena, she is the woman who will liberate them from the traditional banking system. She is the founder of OneCoin, a digital currency she confidently proclaims to be the ultimate Bitcoin killer. She tells them that within 2 years, nobody will even speak of Bitcoin anymore. The crowd erupts. They believe they are on the ground floor of a technological revolution that will make them unimaginably wealthy. But everything happening in that arena is a meticulously crafted lie. There is no revolution. There is no revolutionary technology. In fact, there is not even a real cryptocurrency. Behind the glamour, the inspirational rhetoric, and the billions of dollars flowing into bank accounts around the world, lies nothing but empty digital space and a staggering web of deceit. Today, we dissect the anatomy of a cult-like Ponzi scheme. We will explore the psychological mechanisms that exploit the human fear of missing out, the technical smoke and mirrors used to fool regulators and investors alike, and the geopolitical labyrinth that allowed the architect of this $4 billion fraud to vanish off the face of the earth. We are going to examine precisely how Dr. Ruja Ignatova built an empire on thin air and became the only woman on the Federal Bureau of Investigation's 10 Most Wanted Fugitives list. To understand the anatomy of this extraordinary fraud, we must first examine the architect. Ruja Ignatova was not a typical street-level grifter. Her background was draped in legitimate elite credentials, which served as the foundational armor for her later deceptions. Born in Sofia, Bulgaria, in 1980, she moved with her family to Schramberg, Germany, when she was 10 years old. Even as a child, she exhibited an intense, almost ruthless drive to succeed and a deep-seated desire for wealth. She was an outstanding student, relentlessly competitive. She went on to study law at the University of Constance and claimed a degree from the prestigious University of Oxford. Her academic brilliance was real, and it translated into a lucrative early career. She secured a position at the elite management consulting firm, McKinsey & Company. For the everyday investor, this resume was intoxicating. When she later pitched OneCoin, people did not see a con artist. They saw a McKinsey consultant, an Oxford scholar, a woman who fundamentally understood the complexities of global finance. This veneer of institutional legitimacy was the first crucial element in her scheme's anatomy. It acted as an intellectual shield. When critics questioned the viability of OneCoin, her followers simply pointed to her credentials. How could someone so highly educated, so thoroughly vetted by the upper echelons of the corporate world, be running a scam? However, her professional past held dark precursors to OneCoin. In 2012, Ruja and her father acquired a cast-iron foundry in Waltenhofen, Germany. Within a short period, the company went bankrupt, leaving the workforce stranded and the suppliers unpaid. Ruja was subsequently convicted of fraud in Germany, receiving a suspended prison sentence for illicitly siphoning money from the company before its collapse. This incident demonstrated a critical psychological trait. Ruja was not afraid to cross legal and ethical boundaries for personal enrichment, and she was capable of orchestrating complex financial maneuvers to extract capital from failing enterprises. But the Waltenhofen affair was merely a rehearsal. The true opportunity arose when she observed the explosive, chaotic rise of early cryptocurrency. In the early 2010s, Bitcoin was transitioning from a niche cypherpunk project into a global phenomenon. Early adopters who had bought Bitcoin for pennies were suddenly becoming millionaires. The media was saturated with stories of newly minted crypto wealth. This created a profound global psychological condition known as the fear of missing out, or FOMO. People who barely understood what a blockchain was felt a desperate, gnawing anxiety that the greatest wealth transfer in modern history was passing them by. They felt they had missed the boat on Bitcoin, and they were desperately searching for the next big thing. Ruja Ignatova recognized this desperation not as a financial trend, but as a psychological vulnerability waiting to be exploited. To build her empire, Ruja needed a mechanism to distribute her illusion. She found the perfect vehicle by partnering with Sebastian Greenwood, a man with extensive experience in the world of multi-level marketing, or MLM. The anatomy of OneCoin is inextricably linked to the mechanics of multi-level marketing. Unlike Bitcoin, which relies on a decentralized network of miners and open-source code, OneCoin relied on a top-down hierarchical army of salespeople. The genius and the profound tragedy of OneCoin was the marriage of the incomprehensible complexity of cryptocurrency with the aggressive, network-driven sales tactics of an MLM. People were not actually buying cryptocurrency. They were buying educational packages. These packages ranged from a few €100 to over 100,000 euros. The packages contained plagiarized, practically worthless materials about trading and finance, but the educational material was merely a legal loophole, a way to bypass regulations by claiming they were selling educational products, not financial securities. The true lure was the promotional tokens included with these packages. Investors were told that these tokens could be submitted to the OneCoin mining pools to generate actual OneCoins. Furthermore, the MLM structure meant that if you convinced your friends, family, and neighbors to buy these packages, you received a substantial commission. This structure inherently transformed investors into accomplices. The moment someone bought into OneCoin, they were heavily incentivized to recruit others. This created a localized echo chamber of validation. You trusted the pitch because it came from your sister, your pastor, or your respected community leader. The multi-level marketing model shifted the burden of trust from the faceless corporation to intimate interpersonal relationships. Ruja Ignatova did not have to convince the world. She only had to convince the charismatic leaders at the top of the pyramid, who then cascaded the deception down through their networks, profiting immensely at every tier. To maintain this staggering influx of capital, Ruja deployed technical smoke and mirrors of unprecedented audacity. She needed investors to believe that massive server farms were solving complex cryptographic puzzles to mine OneCoin, just like Bitcoin. She broadcasted real-time numbers on screens at global events, showing the value of OneCoin steadily, impossibly climbing. Bitcoin is notoriously volatile, experiencing dramatic crashes and spikes based on market forces. OneCoin, however, only ever went up. This lack of volatility was presented as a feature, a sign of stability under Ruja's expert guidance. In reality, it was the clearest indicator of a rigged system. The most astonishing technical deceit of OneCoin was the utter absence of a blockchain. A blockchain is a distributed, decentralized public ledger. It is the fundamental architecture of any true cryptocurrency. It ensures transparency and prevents double spending without the need for a central authority. OneCoin had no such ledger. Behind the slick website and the rising digital numbers was a simple SQL database. It was an ordinary spreadsheet housed on a centralized server, manipulated manually by Ruja and her closest associates. They simply typed in the numbers they wanted people to see. The audacity of this technical lie was exposed to a select few early on, in 2016, as the company was bringing in hundreds of millions of dollars a month. They reached out to a Norwegian blockchain expert named Bjorn Bjerke. They offered him a phenomenal salary, a car, and an apartment to become their chief technical officer. During the interview process, Bjerke asked to see the source code for their blockchain. The recruiters admitted, to his absolute astonishment, that they did not have a blockchain yet. They wanted to hire him to build one. Bjerke realized immediately that if they were already selling billions in cryptocurrency without a blockchain, the entire enterprise was a criminal fraud. He declined the offer and became one of the first prominent whistleblowers, trying to warn the world. But whistleblowers like Bjerke faced a formidable obstacle. The anatomy of OneCoin had evolved beyond a simple financial scam into a highly organized cult-like movement. To insulate the scheme from external criticism, Ruja and her inner circle actively fostered a profound us versus them mentality. Anyone who questioned the technology, including financial regulators and journalists, was branded a hater. The leaders of the OneCoin network told their followers that the traditional banking establishment and the mainstream media were terrified of OneCoin's disruptive power. Therefore, negative news was not evidence of a scam. It was evidence that OneCoin was succeeding and terrifying the global elite. This psychological conditioning is the hallmark of a cult. When investors raised concerns, they were not met with facts or technological proof. They were met with emotional manipulation. They were told their faith was weak, that they did not understand the vision, and that if they listened to the haters, they would miss out on the financial liberation promised to them. The leaders weaponized community and belonging. For many investors, OneCoin was no longer just an investment. It was their social circle, their daily focus, and their identity. To accept that OneCoin was a fraud meant not only losing their life savings, but also admitting they had been profoundly foolish and had likely dragged their loved ones into financial ruin. The psychological cost of waking up was simply too high for many to bear. This dynamic was tragically evident in the populations OneCoin targeted. While they successfully extracted millions from wealthy European and Asian investors, their most devastating impact was in developing nations and unbanked communities. Promoters traveled to countries like Uganda, holding seminars in villages where people had no access to traditional banking, let alone an understanding of digital cryptography. They preyed on the desperate hope of escaping poverty. Families sold their livestock, mortgaged their land, and liquidated their meager life savings to buy OneCoin educational packages. The promoters sold them a dream of sending their children to university and building new homes, while systematically draining the capital out of these vulnerable communities and funneling it into offshore accounts controlled by Ruja. As 2016 turned into 2017, the sheer scale of the fraud began to strain the illusion. You can only promise a revolution for so long before people demand to see the results. Investors were accumulating millions of digital OneCoins on their screens, but they had no way to cash them out. Ruja had constantly promised the launch of an exchange platform where OneCoins could be traded for traditional fiat currency. She called it the Xcoin X exchange. However, the launch was perpetually delayed, always with a plausible excuse regarding regulatory hurdles or technical upgrades. The pressure from top-tier promoters and anxious investors was mounting. Ruja had built a machine that required an exponential influx of new money to sustain the illusion. But the pool of gullible investors was finite. Furthermore, international law enforcement agencies were finally waking up. Financial regulators in Germany, Italy, and India began issuing severe warnings, seizing assets, and even making arrests of local promoters. Banks, noticing massive irregular international wire transfers, began closing OneCoin accounts, making it increasingly difficult for the organization to process incoming funds or pay commissions to its top recruiters. The walls were closing in, and the architect of the fraud knew that the collapse was mathematically inevitable. In October 2017, Ruja Ignatova organized a massive gathering for OneCoin promoters in Lisbon, Portugal. It was intended to be another rally of faith, another display of glittering success, but Ruja never showed up. Panic began to ripple through the top ranks of the organization. Her brother, Konstantin Ignatov, who had been heavily involved in the day-to-day operations, claimed he had no idea where she was. Behind the scenes, the truth was far more calculated. Ruja had been tipped off that the FBI and international authorities were closing in. She knew that an indictment was imminent. On October 25, 2017, Ruja Ignatova boarded a Ryanair flight from Sofia, Bulgaria, to Athens, Greece. She traveled with a companion, but upon landing in Athens, she seemingly evaporated. There is no record of her departing Athens on any commercial flight, train, or registered vehicle. From that moment, the Cryptoqueen became a ghost. She abandoned her brother, her young daughter, her husband, and her massive global network of victims. She disappeared with an estimated personal fortune of hundreds of millions, perhaps billions of dollars, funneled through an impossibly complex web of shell companies, offshore trusts, and money laundering operations. The immediate aftermath of her disappearance highlights the resilience of the cult anatomy she had created. Even with their visionary leader gone, OneCoin did not immediately collapse. Her brother Konstantin stepped into the vacuum, attempting to maintain the facade. The organization simply pivoted its narrative. They claimed Ruja had gone into hiding to protect the company from assassins hired by the banking cartel. Astonishingly, many investors believed this. They continued to hold their digital tokens, continued to recruit new members, and continued to wait for the promised exchange to open. The psychological conditioning was so profound that even the flight of the founder was interpreted as a sign of the project's paramount importance. However, the international dragnet was tightening. In March 2019, Konstantin Ignatov was arrested by the FBI at Los Angeles International Airport. He subsequently pleaded guilty to multiple charges, including wire fraud and money laundering, and agreed to cooperate with authorities, providing crucial inside information about the operation of the scam. Sebastian Greenwood, the co-founder who engineered the MLM structure, was arrested in Thailand and extradited to the United States. He also pleaded guilty and was sentenced to 20 years in federal prison. The investigations unraveled a staggering network of enablers who had operated in the shadows. It was revealed that Ruja had employed high-powered attorneys to launder the proceeds of the fraud. Mark Scott, a former partner at a prestigious American law firm, was convicted of laundering $400 million for OneCoin through fake private equity funds based in the British Virgin Islands. The case exposed the dark underbelly of the global financial system, showing how easily illicit funds can be sanitized when disguised behind corporate veils and facilitated by corrupt professionals willing to turn a blind eye for a substantial fee. Despite the arrests of her inner circle, Ruja Ignatova remained entirely elusive. The theories surrounding her fate are as numerous as they are dramatic. Some investigators believe she is hiding in plain sight, living under a highly sophisticated false identity in a jurisdiction without an extradition treaty, such as Dubai or Russia. She had deep connections to organized crime figures in Bulgaria and Eastern Europe, and some speculate she utilized these networks to secure safe passage and a new life. Another darker theory suggests that she was murdered by the very criminal syndicates she hired to protect her or launder her money. Once she became a high-profile fugitive, her immense wealth made her an incredibly lucrative target, and her existence became a massive liability for those harboring her. In June 2022, the FBI took the extraordinary step of placing Ruja Ignatova on their 10 most wanted fugitives list, offering a reward of up to $100,000, which was later increased to $5 million, for information leading to her arrest. She is currently the only woman on that list. Her inclusion underscores the sheer magnitude of the devastation she caused. This was not a victimless white-collar crime. It was a financial massacre that ruined lives, destroyed families, and destabilized local economies across the globe. The outcome of the OneCoin saga remains a massive unresolved wound. While lieutenants have been jailed and some assets seized, the vast majority of the $4 billion stolen from investors is permanently gone, vanished into the opaque channels of international money laundering. The victims are left with nothing but worthless digital tokens and the crushing psychological weight of having been manipulated on such a profound scale. Many refuse to accept reality to this day, still clinging to online forums, convinced that Ruja is working in secret to launch the exchange and make them all rich. The anatomy of the OneCoin fraud is a masterclass in the weaponization of human desire. Ruja Ignatova did not build a financial institution. She built a psychological trap. She understood that in an era of rapid, confusing technological advancement, people are terrified of being left behind. By combining the incomprehensible jargon of cryptocurrency with the predatory, trust-exploiting mechanics of multi-level marketing, she created an illusion so powerful that it bypassed all rational scrutiny. She sold a dream of financial equality, but she engineered a machine designed solely to enrich herself. The Cryptoqueen's enduring absence is a haunting reminder of the fragility of our financial systems and the profound vulnerability of human hope. The true tragedy of OneCoin is not just the billions of dollars stolen, but the systematic exploitation of the inherent human desire for a better life. Until Ruja Ignatova is found, the final chapter of this unprecedented digital illusion remains unwritten, leaving the victims trapped forever in the shadow of a revolution that never existed. This has been Anatomy of Crime, where the truth is never simple, but always worth seeking.